What's going on, everybody? Brezzy43 here, coming at you with our next video. Today, I thought it would be fun to revisit our restricted Pokemon tier list and make any revisions and talk about things that maybe I was not correct about in my original analysis, or things that we want to update. So I think that would be kind of fun. Take a little gander at sort of how the metagame has evolved and kind of go from there. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. So this was our tier list. The last time we did it, I think I can zoom in one more time without making things too... Nope, that's too far. Okay, this is good enough. So if you recall, my S tier, I had just Yveltal and Zacian. A tier, I had a lot of Pokemon, actually. B tier and C tier and D tier. So if you remember, I think I categorized these as S tier being the best of the best, A tier being very strong options, but not quite S tier, B tier being good Pokemon that I think are still good, maybe not quite as like staple as A, but we'll see some play and are good options. C were things that Pokemon that had some things going for it, but ultimately weren't very strong. And then D tier was just basically don't use this Pokemon. The only thing I don't see in this list, if I'm remembering correctly, is I don't see the different Kyrums. Let's take a look at their stats here. I think the white one's better than... I think Kyurem White is better than Kyurem Black, just because it's a special attacker and doesn't suffer from the same sort of intimidate issue and stuff. Okay, well, I don't see them on here. So, let's go ahead and talk about some revisions. So, we just had Players Cup. I actually took a tally here from Players Cup. I'll be making a video here eventually where I talk about... I'll make a video here eventually where I talk about... some of the Pokemon that were used in the Players Cup and sort of the percentages and whatnot. So the Players Cup had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different restricted Pokemon featured, with the most popular one being Zacian. This thing just continues to be super, super strong. I'm going to pull up my Showdown quick here, just because I want to show... the main two builds that we've been seeing. I think most people have gone into a pretty standard, like most people are running max speed, max attack with Jolly, something like this. I also think that you could do, I've been using a different one. I've been using a max HP, adamant spread, but I'm wondering if maybe that's not correct anymore because of the changes recently to the popular Pokemon. This 92 speed outspeeds Thundurus by 1, but there's a lot of things in the metagame that are creeping up in popularity that just outspeed this. Like, for example, some of the offensive teams are adapting Cinderace again, and this thing gets offensively pressured by Cinderace, and can't outspeed it where normally it would so I may have to revisit this speed, maybe drop some of the bulk for some other speed. We'll have to see. But this is the spread. I was using Substitute recently and it's very good. So sub seems to take the place of Swords Dance right now, but ultimately this thing is just everywhere. It gets put on any team and sees success. There's the Lapras Zacian teams, people call them Lapdog. That was the original most popular form of this team because Zacian can't Dynamax and Lapras loves to Dynamax and can... Some would argue, and I would be one of those people that would argue, that it can only Dynamax, otherwise it's just not a good Pokemon. So this was one of the really popular ways to use Zacian at the beginning, was to Dynamax a Lapras, set up Aurora Veil, and put your Zacian inside of Aurora Veil. Realistically, that's only one way that people ended up using it. There's been a lot of Sun teams that have used Zacian. There's been a lot of Colossal teams that have used Zacian. Zacian's just a good Pokemon. You only really need to pair it with a fast Airstreamer like Thundurus or Dragapult or something like that, and it'll do wonders for you. So Zacian's still S tier in my opinion. Yveltal. I actually think Yveltal is not S tier. The hype around Yveltal really died down. It still has some difficult matchups. It doesn't necessarily do that well against Zacian, and it's not something that really has seen a lot of play. I think a fair amount of people. Let's look at Yveltal here quick. I think a fair amount of people have actually been opting for Assault Vest, and I know people run Oblivion Wing, Dark Pulse. I think Foul Play to fight off Calyrex and other things like that, and then Snarl. I think this was the majority of what people were doing. I think some people were also running Heat Wave, so you can hit steel types like Zacian. But this is pretty much my original idea, that you would run Protect, and then you would run Sucker Punch. Just really ended up not being very good. I think that you could still run it this way. It's just not as good as the Assault Vest Heat Wave sort of style. So, and the reality of it is that Yveltal is, when you're playing in a format with only one restricted Pokemon, you have to think about how good is your upgrade for the existing Pokemon. You know, there's a Pokemon that exists right now that you can use, Moltres Galar, that's very similar to this Pokemon. It's a bulky, dark flying type. Now, Yveltal has more stats and is, I don't know if it's bulkier overall. It's definitely bulkier on the physical side, but Moltres has an HP stat of, let's compare. I think it's 90. Yep, 90 HP, but it has 125 SPDF. So it's basically just inverted these two. And Yveltal has a ton of extra stats and attack that it doesn't really take advantage of. And Moltres, so although Yveltal is a better Pokemon than Moltres, how significant of an upgrade is Yveltal from Moltres to warrant your restricted spot? And the answer is just, like, some people are just deducing it's not a significant enough upgrade. So, you know, it's not worth running. Some people would disagree, and that's the beauty of Pokemon, is you can have your own opinions about different Pokemon. But for me, Yveltal really died down. I've seen it a little bit, and it's still fine. It's actually flourishing a lot because Xerneas is not very popular right now, and Xerneas is also not very good. So Yveltal definitely died down, but I still think Yveltal's got some things going for it. I think I would put it in like high B or low A. I think for now I'm going to put it here, just because it does still have some good things going for it, but not really overwhelmingly so. Now we go to my thick A tier here, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about Xerneas. This Pokemon is garbage, and that might be unfair to say. I think you just have to change the way that you use it. C tier might be unfair, but the reality of the situation with Xerneas is that Xerneas thrived in historic metagames with a second restricted Pokemon. Xerneas Groudon was Primal Groudon as well, was one of the most potent combinations of Pokemon that you could do, because Xerneas' only real weakness was Steel types, but also, you know, technically Poison types as well, but Steel types mainly, and Groudon checks both of those very, very well. And Xerneas also had sort of a surprise factor where if your opponent was leading to beat your other restricted Pokemon, then Xerneas could come in and set up with a Geomancy and punish them for leading to beat your other restricted. But the reality is that, for one, Xerneas is an underwhelming single restricted Pokemon. And for two, it doesn't beat Zacian. That's definitely one thing. But three, or the one that is mainly, is just that setting up a Pokemon with a big setup move like Geomancy is just not very good in a Dynamax format. A really prime example of this has been Snorlax. Snorlax has been a potent threat in a lot of VGC history, and Belly Drum is one of its best ways of setting up offense, and it kind of needs that to do a lot of work offensively. It doesn't have to do it necessarily, but with Dynamax format, it really does. And the opponent's Dynamax moves can put you in such a back foot. That's like, Snorlax saw some play at the beginning of the format. It did get a Gmax form that's quite good, but it didn't really take off in the same way that people, it's just not as good because it needs that belly drum to sweep. And Dynamax being such an offensive, explosive mechanic, you can get really far behind in terms of momentum and be put really on the back foot when your opponent Dynamaxes as Snorlax when you try to belly drum. And the same is true for Xerneas. If you go for a Rage Powder from Amoonguss plus Geomancy, your opponent could just knock out your Amoonguss or could just, get a speed boost with Max Airstream, and then they've basically matched your speed boosts with Xerneas, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So Xerneas I think Xerneas would be at the absolute top of the C tier if it's here, but it's probably still a B tier Pokemon. It's a really good Pokemon, but it just hasn't really worked out in this metagame. So, but putting it in C tier just does not feel very, very fair to me. So I'm going to put it like middle B tier. Calyrex Ice. Let's talk about Calyrex Ice. This thing is S tier in my opinion. I was wrong to even assume that it was A tier. It definitely has some things that beat it or that check it, but this thing is absurd. I've used it a little bit, and oh my god, these stats are nuts. This is a really disgusting stat distribution that only snowballs with as one. You can run it a bunch of different ways. Some people are running Mimikyu as a solid Trick Room setter with, this is what I was doing for a little while, Mental Herb Mimikyu with Shadow Sneak to proc a weakness policy on Calyrex, and then this thing can just crush people. Assault Vest is a good option as well, with 4 attacks. This thing is basically just better Glastrier. But one thing you can actually do with this Pokemon that a lot of people haven't really explored yet is you can actually run Trick Room. I guess I shouldn't say a lot of people haven't explored. I don't know what other people have been doing really. But I've seen something really interesting with Clefairy. If you run Friend Guard Clefairy with Eviolite, and you run Policy Calyrex, you can run Follow Me. Put this Calyrex in Friend Guard, and then you can actually run Mystical Fire. And because you can EV this to be slower than your Calyrex, you can actually use Mystical Fire to proc a weakness policy, and after you've set up Trick Room. So you can go Follow Me, Trick Room, have your sweeper already in position. This thing is already bulky as it is, let alone without Friend Guard. And then you can just run 3 attacks here. You run Glacial Lance, plus a couple of other moves, and you just go to town. This thing's potent with and without Dynamax because Glacial Lance is a spread move. So definitely an S tier Pokemon in my opinion. I think Kyogre, it's safe to say, is an S tier Pokemon. I thought these two Pokemon, actually I think they're both S tier. These two Pokemon losing their primal forms, I thought was going to be more impactful to them and their viability. They're still very good. Kyogre plus Tornadus is still very common, or Tailwind plus Water Spout still very, very good. Groudon is enabling very, very potent Sun teams with Venusaur and Charizard, and yeah, it's crazy. So both these Pokemon are incredible Pokemon. I underestimated them. Kyogre Mystic Water has been really popular with Double Water plus Ice Beam, or some people have been running Life Orb Dynamax as well. I still think Wide Lens is the best item on Groudon. Give it that extra 10% to make it so Precipice Blades and Rock Slide almost never miss. So I like both of those moves. And so that's my revision to the S tier. I think that I have a tough time evaluating this Pokemon, this Calyrex Shadow Rider. Some people would say it's an S tier. Some people would say it's the top of the A tier. It's really hard for me to evaluate because I really don't know. Like this thing has 2 4x weaknesses, and one of the most difficult things for it to get through is Dark types, and there's a lot of really good Dark types in the metagame. Yveltal you could use as your restricted, but there's also Moltres like we talked about. There's Incineroar. There's we've seen a slight resurgence of Tyranitar. We've seen some people running Hydreigon. We've seen there's a ton of good Dark types that you could easily slot into your team that pressure Calyrex offensively and can't really take much damage defensively. But it's still a disgusting Pokemon. Its stats are very, very high as well. 165 special attack is nothing to scoff at. So I think it's still a very solid Pokemon. I'm going to leave it in A tier, though. I'm not confident that this thing is quite at the level of these other four, but it is still a very strong option. And it's still better Spectrier, and Spectrier started to see some play at the end of Series 7. So that's going to round out our S tier. In terms of A tier Pokemon, I am going to revise my Necrozma Duskmane. I'm going to put Necrozma Duskmane in the B tier. The reality is that this thing is not quite good enough, in my opinion. When you compared to Solgaleo, this thing loses the ability that Solgaleo has. Let me pull up Necrozma Duskmane just to make sure that I'm reading the ability correctly. Prism Armor means that it's kind of like Solid Rock that Rhyperior has, where you don't take as much damage from super effective attacks. But when you use this ability instead of what Solgaleo has, which is Full Metal Body, you can actually be intimidated. And that's one of the really strong parts about Solgaleo is that you can actually be intimidated. And I don't think that that's good enough to warrant the stat change that you get from, lowering your speed for extra stats. You don't really get as much out of it compared to when you start to get intimidated. You can run a special attacking move if you want, but then you're not taking advantage of these extra 40 points in your attack stat. So I think this is a B tier Pokemon. I still think Dialga is an A tier Pokemon. I actually think Palkia is as well. Both these Pokemon have been super, super good. Palkia struggles a little bit against Lapras because it can't reasonably pressure it offensively, and it dies to Freeze Dry if it doesn't Dynamax. And I wonder how much it does even if it does Dynamax. Let's see. Palkia is really bulky, but let's see. Palkia is bulky. Palkia. So let's say it was Dynamax. I don't know what people are running for spreads. Okay, there's my custom set. So Freeze Dry without any bulk is doing this much damage from Life Orb Lapras. If you're not running Life Orb, if you're running instead Light Clay, it looks like it should still be a 2-hit. Yeah, it should still be a 2-shot. And that's assuming, again, no bulk. But if they were to run something like this for whatever reason, it still has a pretty reasonable chance to... For me, it's happened a couple of times where I've been able to get a huge hit off with Freeze Dry. If they don't Dynamax, they die. Like they're dead. It's 4 times weak. So, but other than that, I think Palkia is really good against some of the other threats in the metagame. It does actually do quite well against Zacian, because water resists steel, and then Sacred Sword doesn't do that much damage to you. You can kind of EV yourself for it. So Palkia is solid. Dialga is still good, like we talked about in the last video. The last time we did this video. It has a lot of potential with boosting its stats. So I think that this is still reasonable, and I think Solgaleo is interestingly enough, or is better enough than Metagross to warrant a restricted slot, more so than Yveltal compared to Moltres. It depends on your team, of course, but Solgaleo gets a couple of interesting moves. Here's its stats. So it is faster than Metagross by a significant amount. It is bulkier than Metagross as well. It has a higher HP stat by a lot more, and it has... Here, we can pull up Metagross to compare. So 137, 135, basically the same attack stat. 107 compared to 130 defense. Definitely Metagross has a better defense stat, but it only has 80 HP, and Solgaleo is 137. And they both have the same special defense stat for all intents and purposes. So Solgaleo is faster and has more overall bulk, where Metagross is probably similarly bulky just defensively, maybe slightly more bulky, but Solgaleo can actually set up its own Trick Room, which is something that we've seen some people do. There was a really potent team that was running around before. I'm just going to throw it up here quick. Grimmsnarl, Metagross, Spectrier. Come on. I don't want the 0. Okay. Spectrier. Some people were doing Entei instead of Spectrier. Then there was Rotom. There was Amoonguss. And there was Moltres. This was a really, really potent team that was running around at the end of Series 7. Spectrier could be... You basically just want a Snarl Bulldoze user here. This thing has the ability to also run Will-O-Wisp, though, and it's faster. So that's part of the reason why people were running it over Entei. But this was a fast Snarl Bulldoze user, as well as Sucker Punch Grim with Thunder Wave. And so you have two different forms of speed control for your Metagross that has policy. You can either Bulldoze, drop the opponent's speed stat, proc your policy, or you can Thunder Wave stuff and Sucker Punch and whatever. And you can get speed control for your Metagross that way. Rotom, Amoonguss, and Moltres are just good Pokemon as well. And I actually think Solgaleo fits really nicely into this team, because if you run Solgaleo here, you also offer yourself another form of speed control with Trick Room, and you still get to run Amoonguss with Solgaleo potentially as well for a Rage Powder Trick Room. And this thing doesn't need to have a ton of speed to synergize with these Mons. So you could, for example, I don't know what the actual stat is, but you could run something like this, and then you'd have, you'd synergize with Bulldoze and Thunder Wave, and then you could still do your, you probably would EV mostly for special bulk. It's not letting me do this. There we go. And then you'd probably do like a lot of special bulk, and then whatever else you're going to do here. Something like this. For example, whatever speed stat you want to benchmark. But then you're still not terrible in Trick Room, because you're still going to outspeed some of these hyper offensive teams, and you're still going to have, Rotom and Amoonguss that do well inside Trick Room as well. So, Solgaleo actually fits nicely here. It does also get Wide Guard, so I like Wide Guard as well. So I like this. I like Solgaleo a lot. I think it's still an A tier Pokemon. Looking at our B tier, the only real change I think is to just lower this to C tier. This thing is just really not good. It's suffering from the same issues Lunala is, and that's that Lunala gets outsped by both Calyrex Shadow Rider and Regieleki, and Aleki can break the Shadow Shield and then it just and drop its speed in the same attack, which is not super great for it. And Zacian can pressure it offensively and whatnot. So both these Pokemon are still they're solid Pokemon overall. They're just not quite there for this metagame. I don't think there's any other changes I think I would make. I think Lugia might have been unfair to put into the D tier. I actually think I might do something like this. Eternatus is just pretty rough. Giratina as well. Just not phenomenal Pokemon. I think you just have better options across the board. Some of these Pokemon would see play if we had a second restricted, like, Zamazenta potentially could be a really good defensive option on a team if you wanted to, run something that gets wide. Like a Lapras team could run both Zacian and Zamazenta and have two really solid steel types and potentially use that to their advantage. But some of these Pokemon like Xerneas, like Zamazenta, like potentially Lunala, Yveltal, things like that would get a lot better when you have a second restricted Pokemon. I still don't want to make it sound like Yveltal is a bad Pokemon. I think I overhyped it. And I think that's where I want to make my revision, is that I overhyped the Pokemon, and I want to lower down people's expectations a little bit for it, and just, compare it directly to Moltres, because that's where the comparison should be. Whereas these other Pokemon here in the metagame, and to some extent Spectrier, Calyrex Shadow, and Dialga and Palkia, these Pokemon are just these Pokemon don't have alternatives, right? Like, technically Glastrier and Spectrier can slot in over here, but these Pokemon get access to other moves that those Pokemon don't get. And that's why Solgaleo is up here as well. But these 8 Pokemon are just, significantly better than any other options you have in the metagame, that if you chose to run these Pokemon, everyone's gonna be like, oh, I get it, But these other Pokemon, it's like, do you have a specific reason why you're running Yveltal over Moltres? What about Ho-Oh? What are you doing with Ho-Oh that something like Charizard doesn't do for you, or something like, that's not a fair comparison either, because Ho-Oh has way more stats than Charizard. But I'm just saying, these Pokemon are a bit more underwhelming, or have more alternatives available to them in terms of why you would want to run them. But ultimately, in my personal opinion, Pokemon is a game about fun, and I think that you should, if you want to use Zekrom or Rayquaza or Lunala, then you definitely should use those Pokemon and build a team around them. Remember that almost any Pokemon can be competitively viable as long as you build around it. And remember to keep your matchups in mind and things like that. If you want to run Weakness Policy Lugia, do it. Calm Mind Weakness Policy Lugia sounds dope, but it also is kind of just understand that you may not be using the best available Pokemon, so you might have to build your team according to enabling the Lugia. So yeah, I think this is my new revised tier list. Thank you all for watching. It's fun to do these. I enjoy them. I might do another one here in our next video for like other Pokemon that are popular right now that are actually good, like non-restricted Pokemon, that making a tier list of those. So I think I might do that next. We'll see. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the revisions here, and we have 1 month left. Excuse me. We have 1 month and a half left. We have the rest of March and all of April with this metagame, and then starting May 1st, we go back to Series 7 rules, but we're calling it Series 9. So we're going to have to see how that goes, but I hope you all are enjoying the restricted metagame. I've actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I've done some experimenting with Calyrex, Ice Rider, and what was the other one I used? Groudon. Those are the two I've done some experimenting with, and Zacian has been the one I've used the most. I've got some ideas for Solgaleo and Dialga that I might implement for the channel, but I think that ultimately I'm interested in continuing to refine my Lapras team, because the Laprazation team is just something that I really enjoy using, and so I definitely want to continue using it. But yeah, this is my revised tier list. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video.